What if one man could ignite the dream of freedom across an entire continent? That was born in 1783 in Caracas, Venezuela. Grew up under the heavy hand of Spanish colonial rule. His family was wealthy thanks to their ownership of a large farm that produced cocoa, coffee, and tobacco, but was not interested in the comfortable life of a landowner. Born restless, he dreamed of a different destiny for himself and for his homeland. At 16, he left Venezuela to study law in Spain, but soon became disillusioned with the rigid rules and traditions of the Spanish way of life. Instead, he immersed himself in the ideas of the Enlightenment, the belief that reason and individual liberty were the path to progress and happiness. Back then, colonies were considered property of the ruling power. Colonialism was simply how things had always been done. But others began to question this system. They argued that colonies should be allowed to govern themselves, and that all people were created equal. This was a radical idea that went against everything the Spanish had taught. And it was here in Europe that decided he would dedicate his life to the fight for independence. He returned to South America in 1807 with his sights set on nothing less than the complete overhaul of the social order. The following year, news broke out across the Spanish colonies of Napoleon's invasion of Spain and the deposition of its king. Seizing the opportunity, called for a meeting of colonial leaders in Venezuela to discuss a plan for independence. In Itzembaba-Ishur, when was just 27, the First Republic was declared. And soon after, led a small army into battle against the Spanish. Through years of fighting, and his ragtag army of revolutionaries crossed the Andes Mountains, surviving on little more than sheer willpower and determination. They battled through the dangerous jungle regions of modern-day Colombia and Ecuador, and despite suffering defeats and even torture at the hands of the Spanish, refused to give up. He kept pushing forward, inspired by the promise of a better future for his people. In 1821, after more than a decade of fighting, the Spanish finally recognized the independence of Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. In all, had liberated 5 countries from colonial rule. He was now known throughout Latin America as El Libertador, and at the height of his fame, he was even offered the position of Emperor of the new nation of Gran Colombia, which encompassed the former Spanish colonies of Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, but turned down the offer. He didn't want to be an emperor. He wanted all of the nations of South America to be free. Instead, he continued to push for unity among the new republics, envisioning a single federation of free nations, stretching from north to south, independent of European powers, and able to stand on equal footing with the rest of the world. But dream of a united continent would not be realized. Political divisions and old rivalries between the colonies proved too strong. Regional differences and competing interests quickly overrode any sense of national unity. And Dream died along with him on December 17, 1830, when he died of tuberculosis at the age of just 47, when the news of his death reached the capital of Colombia, a funeral procession over a mile-long wound through the streets. All government offices were closed and flags were lowered to half-staff. A woman who attended the funeral later wrote, "The deepest sorrow was felt by all classes of people, not only as the death of the great liberator, but as the loss of a father. Though never lived to see his dream of a united South America, he did see many of the nations he fought for gain independence, and to this day is celebrated as the man who lit the flame of freedom for millions." I've been your host. If you want to hear more stories of history's visionaries, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.